So, you spoke about the Nirbhaya moment, and that was a gang rape and murder that took place, in a public space. But as we know, and we've spoken about this, Padma, uh, where we are really violated is actually in the circle of trust. And then there are shrouds of violence thrown over that experience. I remember being a child of what, 10, when a relative in my extended family sexually abused me. You wrote about being 16 when you were date raped, and you wrote about it many years later. And I still remember the title of that article. It said, 32 years after my rape, I am here. It took 32 years for you to speak about it. It took me, I think, a couple of decades. I think it's when I wrote my book. What happens to us? Why does it take us so long, and why do we speak when we finally do? I want you to talk about why you went public with that, why it was so important. I know it was against the backdrop of what was happening with the Me Too movement, with Harvey Weinstein, with people saying, why don't women speak when it happens, not understanding the complexity of all the multiple emotions that an incident of sexual violence and abuse triggers.
I think that moment, I mean, I had talked about briefly, very briefly in my memoir 5 years ago about also being sexually abused as a child by a relative. But other than that one page in my book, I really hadn't spoken about my personal experience. And, when the Kavanaugh hearings were going on in America, this was a Supreme Court judge who was being confirmed. And, this very had come and said, I was date raped by him. And it just made me really feel demoralized, because the same situation had happened when I was in college, almost 25, 28 years ago, when another Supreme Court judge, Clarence Thomas, was also being confirmed, and somebody else, very credible, Anita Hill, had been, brave enough to come out, and she was vilified. And so was Christine Blasey Ford, which is why women don't come out. The reason that women aren't safe on the or in public spaces is because women aren't really safe in their homes. You see, if you're safe in your home, and if you're safe by the men in your life, whether it's your family or your schoolmates or your professional circles, then you will be safe in a public space, because who else do you think is occupying that public space? So there's no incentive except rage and incredible courage for anybody of sexual assault or abuse to come out, because you're the one put under the microscope, because the patriarchy is designed to protect the power structure. And it's because what you're doing when you speak out about these things is you are disrupting the status quo, because your life has been disrupted, and you're trying to prevent further disruption for, all the other women around, right? But it's not seen as that way, because whenever there's growth, there's pain. You cannot change anything without breaking something. And people are afraid of that. So the society doesn't make it very easy for you. And that's why people don't come out, whether they're protected and they have financial means in New York City, or whether they're sitting in some village, in Bihar. Like, it's the same bullshit everywhere. It's just a varying degrees. And I just was sick of it. I was disgusted. And I was hearing all these things on Twitter that said, if it was so bad, why didn't she report? And then there was this hashtag, me too. And I thought, I want to say, listen, this has happened 2-3 times in my life, and I never reported. And then that was on a Friday. And then I thought, what happened to me was really, really devastating and serious. And I have managed it alone all my life until now. But it deserves more than a hashtag. What happened to Asha Devi's daughter deserves more. And I'm so glad that she is naming her daughter, because she's right. Her daughter didn't do anything wrong. She's completely innocent, and we've got it backwards because we're afraid of this change. It's coming. It's coming in drips and drabs, or it's coming in a tsunami, but it is coming. And so you have to find some kind of power in the pain that you've gone through. And the only way, not to justify it, but anything positive out of what had happened to me is to say, listen, I'm here as proof that this stuff, this horrific stuff, happens to all of us, regardless of economic class, education, religion, ethnicity, whether you're married, it happens. And that's what that was about. It was for me just out of real disgust at the system. And I wanted to do what I could. And the only thing that I could do that would have been the most powerful thing is to openly say out loud, you know, the thing that I had never even said, it turns out, to my own mother. And I'm very close to my mother. I had to fact check that article I wrote myself, you know, and it's very hard to rip off a 32-year-old Band-Aid. And yet that's really what I had to do.